You're listening to the Big Vision Business Owners podcast. This is the podcast for business owners who have a message to share and want to have an impact on the world. I'm Chantel Dyson, your host of Big Vision Business Owners, as well as your podcast expert and online visibility coach. And each week I'll be discussing alongside you all of those things that go into being a big vision business owner, of being able to get that message out there, to build a community of people that hear that message and share those values, and actually then help you make change in the world, as well as growing your business. It's all about creating a true connection to your audience, building a community that surrounds your business and spreads your message for you. And it's about changing the way the world thinks, one podcast at a time. And with that, let's begin with today's episode. When you're a life coach that is dealing with people one-to-one, as opposed to a group program in particular where you're leveraging your time there, you have so many other things going on that content creation falls to the bottom of the list. We think that by posting more, we're going to get seen more. And being able to prioritize in this process is so important. Today, we are going to be talking about how to save time on content creation. This is the essence of the clever content creator. The reason that I came up with the name The Clever Content Creator was because I didn't just want to be any old content creator or teach people how to make any old content. I wanted people to do it the clever way. When I first started the business, I was a full-time maths teacher. I was a head of year as well. So I was in a pretty demanding professional job. And somehow, I'm really not sure to this day how, somehow I managed to leverage the online platforms that I was running to get there. And I do know how I did that. The idea was being clever with the way that I created content, because at certain times, and I'll talk about why I don't advocate for this as a strategy later on in the episode, but at times I was posting 5 pieces of content to TikTok every single day. Now, if you've heard the likes of Gary Vaynerchuk, he would be like, you've got to be posting everywhere. And that's applicable to people that have a bit more time, a bit more of a team potentially to help leverage that, or funds to be able to outsource that. When you are on your own in business and you're not at a stage where you're able to outsource, and also at the start, it's really important for you to hone in on your message and know how all the strategies work anyway. I'm a true believer that you should do everything in your business at least once. And that includes accounts and tax returns. And I'm just going to put it out there that when you're a limited company, what a joke that is, because I've been self-employed since I was 16 and I've filed tax returns for me personally for a long time. Doesn't bother me, doesn't faze me. The limited companies one, even as a micro business, oh my goodness, insane. Like, just the wording, it's I don't think it's that difficult. I just think they make it seem much more difficult, and it feels so much more stressful. Anyways, I believe that you should do that so you understand the value of what the person that you eventually pay to do it is worth. I will not, if I can avoid it, do that limited company tax return myself, because it's just not worth the stress. And also to have a level of expertise and understanding in it, so that when you choose to have someone do your returns, when you're, connecting with them, working out who you want to do it, you know that they know that what they're talking about is correct. And the same goes for marketing too. So I'm all for making sure that you do that. And so at the start, sometimes you don't even have a choice. You have to do all of that content creation. However, I know what it's like when you're a life coach that is dealing with people one-to-one, a therapist, any sort of person that at the beginning is dealing with one-to-one opportunities with people, as opposed to a group program in particular where you're leveraging your time there. You have so many other things going on that content creation falls to the bottom of the list. You are dealing with actually managing clients and delivering sessions. Before that, you were actually trying to acquire them. So marketing in other formats such as networking and actually sending out emails, making phone calls, sales calls, closing people. You're dealing with all of the admin, not just accounts, but all of the insurances, onboarding, website management, any little silly things that also distract you from doing some of the bigger tasks in your business. You're also trying to make sure that you're getting better at your own craft, life coaching, therapy, whatever it might be, but also getting better at business too, because at this stage you probably got to learn how to do it. And you've then got your own life to be managing. So whether you've got kids or not, we all know how much of a drain kids can be, whether you've got them or not. If you that's really obvious. And as a new step parent, I'm experiencing that firsthand, though I could fully appreciate that even without that experience, I knew how draining and attention demanding they are. So you've got that. So then amongst all the other things in your life, you've got your own well-being, your own personal activities to deal with. Like, your business is a big chunk of your life, and hopefully you're passionate about it. It doesn't always feel like it's draining or stressful, but there are going to be little things in business that come up. It's never just going to be wonderful all the time. There'll be bits that we don't like doing, etc. And all of this is building up and adding to the fact that content creation is slowly falling down the list. And then there's the whole concept of content creation itself. Like, what do I post? When do I post it? How often? The tech's getting in your way. You've got to sit there and make it all. And all of these things where it means that you just don't end up posting, or you start posting for the sake of posting. You like put a picture up and you're like, well, I've posted. It's better to have that than to not have anything at all. Then means that you're scattergunning. You're just trying to get anything out to tick the box of, I've done content creation this week, I've got my social media going, when you haven't thought strategically about awareness content, connection content, and conversion content. You haven't actually got that strategy or any awareness of all of the stuff that goes behind content and what it's actually for. And this is all a symptom of not having a system or process to what you're doing, and actually having a strategy where you understand why posting for the sake of posting is no bloody use. Why, yes, you do have to balance everything else, but if you could just dedicate a significant amount of time, a good amount of time to plan, and just plan what is manageable. There is this misconception in content creation and being present online, is that you've got to post every day. You've got to be showing up. You've got to be there. And the word consistency gets thrown around. Now, I do believe in consistently. You should be there regularly, and you should show your audience that you're going to be there for them, that you're not just going to ghost them and disappear. So you've got to show that you're going to be there, interact, share useful information about who you are, what you do, inspiring stuff, valuable stuff, entertaining stuff, all of these things. But we think that by posting more, we're going to get seen more. Now, I mentioned just now that I posted 5 times a day on TikTok. I did. From the minute I got home after work at school, I would come through the door and I would post one thing. And then an hour later, basically, roughly from then, so I got home around 4, half 4, through to 10 p.m. at night, I would post one thing roughly every hour. Now, that isn't a strategy I recommend to anybody, particularly time-strapped people. I did it in a very strategic and processed way. I would have, and I still to this day have, hundreds of videos in drafts. I could execute that process right now if I wanted to. And I have the variety of content also saved in those drafts to be able to hit different types of content. But the reason that I don't do that anymore is because the intent was never to get more eyes on the business. The way I was using 5 pieces of content going out on TikTok a day is, one, it's a normal process to have multiple pieces of content out on TikTok as a principle. On Instagram, the biggest creators put out 3 pieces of content a day, and I mean the real big players who have massive social media teams. But the general gist is that it's once a day to your feed post, right? So you've got to understand the premise of each app and understand the differences between it. But I was in an experimentation phase, and there is an experimentation exception, as I like to call it, which is that if you're in the zone where you're like, I don't know what to post, I don't know what I like to do, I don't know what my audience want, the way to find out what content works for you, your business, and your audience is to go knee deep in content creation for a week or 2 weeks and do that. Post 3 to 5 times a day of a variety of content to see what reactions you get. And, you stagger them, you do them all at different times. So you don't put videos all in the evening because the evening's likely to get more attention. You stagger it. So a video could go out at 8, a video could go out at 12, and another video at 5, or you mix it up with carousel. So the carousel went out at 8 one day, then it went out at the middle of the day, then it went out in the evening the next day, to rotate it and see if time has any effect as well, which it does. But that's an exception thing. That's an area in which you go after that 1 to 3 week period, you go, right, this is the content I like to make and I think has the most impact, the ones that I feel like I get a good flow with, can communicate myself with, and you build up confidence of being on camera very quickly. If you were able to do 3 pieces of content a day for a week, that's 21 tests that you've done. Whereas if you did that at a rate of 1 a day, that would take you 3 weeks to work out. We're just reducing the time it takes to work stuff out. So that's a side note to what we're really looking at today. So what I want to introduce you to is a number of ways that you can approach the way that you create content so that it reduces the time that you spend on content by half. If you listen to the last episode, you will have heard that when I was on my recovery bed after surgery, I came up with the idea of podcasting. And that was because I felt like content creation was a slog. And I also wasn't in any fit state to do a lot of dancing around, etc. I'd had to have pre-recorded that. Now, one of the reasons that a podcast or a blog or one big quality piece of content is a great way to approach content overall is because of the waterfall method, as me and my partner like to refer to it. You start at the top with this one excellent, detailed, value-driven piece of content that shares what it is that you're talking about, your beliefs around it, addresses any myths, misconceptions, and challenges some of the beliefs around what that is. And in my case and in my strategy, it's a podcast because of the way that you can leverage it later in a much more convenient way than a blog. But that's at the top. And then after that, it becomes other pieces of valuable content. So if you start with a podcast at the top, that can then be turned into a blog post and an email. And you could go either way with any of those. You could start with the blog, which is then the script for your podcast, and also gets turned into an email. So you've now not just got one piece of great long form content, you've got 2 more. After that, you then trickle down into the short form content media. So this is why I value the podcast over a blog. I can literally take the podcast and chop it into tiny little snippets of 30 seconds through to 90 seconds, depending on what platform I'm intending on putting it on. Once I have those, I can then upload them to the various different platforms, adjusting them slightly with headlines. But the reality is that Reels, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts all work in a very similar, not the same, way in terms of needing hooks at the start, interesting headlines, having captions to make it easier for people to watch with sound off, all these minutiae of detail. But they all came from something that just needs editing. I don't need to sit there and come up with 3 to 4 to 5 new ideas. The idea's already there. I just need to know where it is in the podcast and take it out. So that's your short form video content. But then you take the transcript, which is the words that you've said, written out, which some software does for you automatically. Something like Descript can do that. If you've got Buzzsprout's co-host feature, then it will do that for you as well. And you take that transcript, unless you can remember exactly what you said, and you could have used that to help you do the blog post in general. Depending on how conversation you are, that's more or less helpful. For me, it's a quick way to read through what I said in case I forgot. Ultimately, I'm very casual in the way I talk, and I can't just take those words and put it in a blog. It very much needs tidying up. So then you take the blog and you get some key quotes from that, and they become posts that are shareable content. These are the quote posts that you're putting out on Instagram. And further to that, you then create carousels. Can you see how that strategy saves you so much of the thinking time? Don't get me wrong, there is some legwork to be done with taking the content and repurposing it. But the priority every week becomes your podcast. Your podcast or your big piece of content becomes the most important thing every week. And if there's only one thing that you do, it's the podcast. The podcast is the most important thing. And based on last week's episode, this long piece of content is the bit that is building the know, like, and trust factors with your audience. It's the bit that people are getting the most from. It's the value building stuff, the bit where they get to know you. That is your priority. And being able to prioritize in this process is so important. You can skip posting on Instagram for a week to make sure your podcast comes out there. Part of having a system to the way you work allows you to factor in your time. One of the processes that you can go through is that you can literally come off of social media for a week to make sure that you get your 4 episodes recorded of your podcast, get them repurposed into a blog, get them uploaded, get them edited, and that's done for a week. Then in the subsequent 3 weeks is when you then spend your half day each week or your couple of hours on a Sunday night scheduling 3 really great posts that go out there for Instagram. So it's 1 week off, 3 weeks on, or it's 1 week of podcast creation, 3 weeks of repurposing creation. You could do it all in one day if you've got enough time, if you're speedy enough, if you're good with the tech. You can do all of these things quicker as you get to know them. But your podcast can get batch recorded. Content should be made in batches. Today, this is the second podcast I've recorded of the day. I'm wearing different clothes. I've made it look different. Who knows when it will get released in terms of sequence. The truth is that the podcast does not get made once a week. It gets made in batches. And when I then do any kind of other content, so not content that's repurposed, but if I ever record videos for TikTok, directly brand new ones, I record them in batch. I record maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 in one outfit and then do exactly the same as I would for the podcast and get changed and record 3, 4, 5, 6 videos in a different outfit. And then if I'm lucky, I'll squeeze a third outfit in too. 1, people don't care what you're wearing. Like, they will see you in the same clothes. It's okay to be wearing the same clothes. You're a brand, you're a business, they'll get over it. But 2, we can trick that system by changing our clothes a couple of times to make it look like we've changed day. It's not the same day. We're not just wearing the same thing. We haven't batch recorded. There are ways to give a different impression. So we've had a few things there with that. We've got this priority of what we're going to use and applying a waterfall system to it to have that one big overarching piece of content that can get repurposed into other stuff. And then there's the concept of batch recording so that you're not constantly spending every single day on your phone, but you're putting in blocks of time to record it. Then you can put in a block of time to edit or to plan, whatever it might be, and schedule it, as opposed to constantly thinking every day, what am I going to post? Now, stories is totally different. Stories to me isn't laborious. It's a bit like, oh, I want to tell my audience that. And every now and then I'm like, oh, I should probably share that to stories because, you know, we've got this being launched or that being launched. Having an overview of your calendar is another way that you can reduce the time for content. Realistically, you would want to take a bird's eye view of your entire calendar for the year. You would want to look at when you'd like to launch, specific times of the year for special days that apply to your business that you want to leverage and use. And we can talk about PR and etc. another time, but just having a general gist of what you'd like to do, what things are happening monthly in your business that are product and service based, what's happening in terms of quarterly elements such as what's going on with networking, any events you're attending or trying to talk at, like get these things marked on the calendar. But within that, once we have that structure of your business, and when you start out looking like a year ahead can sometimes be a bit too far, even sort of 6 months is a bit more comfortable, then you can work backwards of going, right, so we're thinking of launching around here. So that means that these content pieces need to lead up to that. If you're going to launch, in my case, so say I was going to launch something about podcasting, I do need to increase a little bit of content on podcasting. I have that written in anyway. It's a pretty 25% quarter even split between my 4 content pillars. But if I've got a product coming up about something in particular on one of my content pillars, let's not get rid of everything else because it's still useful to be bringing that audience in. But let's just up that a little bit. And if you take that back and you go, right, okay, so that's at the end of March. So therefore, start of January, we need to slowly start incorporating more stuff around podcasting. And I need to make sure I've done a masterclass here. And therefore, how am I going to get people to attend the masterclass? Well, I need to have got people thinking about wanting to do a podcast. So therefore, I need a podcast about podcasts and why it's important to start a podcast. And I also need to think about how I can then put that content out and get attention online. So I want things that are going to grab people's attention. I want things that allow people to know how many podcasts there aren't out there, because people think there's loads when actually they're just not active. And I need to let people know that it's not as hard as they think. They don't need all the tech and they can just get started. And this is when we start to go, this just logically makes sense. I'm not thinking every, like, what am I going to post? What's engaging? What's wonderful? I have an actual intent of everything because I've got an end goal. Start with the end in mind is a phrase that I've heard from Nick James, Expert Empires, and I'm pretty sure he got it from a book. But you start with some of the elements of what you want at the end to work backwards from. Otherwise, what are you making your content for? Don't get me wrong, you can just be going like, I'm learning what I'm trying to say and I'm practicing. That's also a viable stage. It's another exception. It's the experimentation section of a different kind. You're going, well, I'm testing, I'm seeing. Anything where you say I'm testing or I'm experimenting is an exception. Because if you're going, well, I don't know how it's going to work yet. I don't know what product I need. I don't know what's going to be most popular. I don't know what I'm going to offer yet. Then sure, put the content out there, follow the download numbers, etc. See what's popular. That makes sense. But if you know, I want to be launching a one-to-one life coaching course. Okay, so what's the ultimate goal for that life coaching course? And every life coaching course is different. What does that audience want or need? What is it that they're really, really struggling with? And let's then factor that content in so we know what we're trying to make. Otherwise, you're just making content for the sake of making content. So any kind of calendar that can allow you to structure what you're making is going to help you save time, because you're not just then, again, you're not just scattergunning ideas of what you think is going to work. You're trying to really speak to a particular outcome. And when we then zoom back out, we've got monthly views. So then we start to look at, what do you need to do monthly? So is it a week on podcast content creation and then the other 3 weeks are on short form content creation? Is it that you're going to have a monthly day of all content gets sorted and that's it, planned for the month? Or are you going to go for a weekly approach? I like a Sunday evening to schedule my short form video content, and I like to be able to do the long form in a day to 2 days within the month. So today the aim was 2. If I manage to get 3, then that'd be wonderful. But we've got this element of understanding the purpose of what you're doing and the overarching calendar view of how you're going to be approaching your content creation process. Now, one of the biggest issues that I see with people online, and this is a problem because it looks like that's what everyone else is doing, is posting to more than one platform. Now, you're going to say to me, Chantel, but you're posting to more than one platform. And I go, I know. My job is online visibility. I have to be on a number of platforms working out what's working. So I can specialize, and I do specialize. My specialisms are TikTok, Instagram, and podcasting, utilizing a podcast within that system. That said, for my own purposes, I know I need to be on LinkedIn. So I'm currently in a stage where I'm using a few tidbits of information that I have learned, and I'm experimenting. Notice that bit. The experimentation exception has come right up for myself. I'm learning how to do LinkedIn. If you're connected with me on LinkedIn, you'll have noticed there are 2 to 4 posts going out a day. I'm in that phase. I'm trying whatever I am. I'm trying different times. I'm trying different types of content. I'm seeing what works. Do I need to write like this? Is it more like a diary? Is it more formal? I don't know yet. Experimentation exception. The only exception you can have to posting to more than one platform is if they directly link together. So if you tell me that when you post to Instagram, it cross-posts to Facebook, I don't care. That's fine. If you tell me that when you schedule via the Meta Business Suite, you're scheduling Facebook and Instagram at exactly the same time, or, like you just change the time for Instagram to be an hour or 2 later, fine. That's not a problem, because it doesn't require you to come up with any other format. You can literally caption for caption, move it across. Generally, the content appears the same. There's a few little sticking points, but that's okay. But if you're saying to me, I'm going to do Instagram and YouTube Shorts, no, we're not. Because that's 2 different platforms. We've got to think about 2 different things. You need slightly different content for it. If you're going to tell me that you're going to do Instagram and Pinterest, it's going to be a push to begin with, because they're so very different. In the early stages, you've got to choose one. And you're going to say to me, but all those big people like Gary Vaynerchuk says you've got to be everywhere, and Stephen Bartlett is everywhere. Whenever I bloody open my apps, all I see is him. And that's cool, but they're different to you. They are not working on their own. They have been in this game for a long time. Gary Vaynerchuk in particular. In fact, both of them are content creation, social media driven. I mean, even Stephen Bartlett takes it to a ridiculous level, like insanely good, but ridiculous level of what they do with their A/B testing using AI to look at different titles for their YouTube video. We don't have time to A/B test at this stage. We're going to use AI, I'll come on to that in a minute, to help us with some elements to speed the process up, but we don't have time to then go back and change the name of the episode to try it out to see if something works better. No, they're different people to you, and you only need to be on one platform, and that is the platform that your audience are mostly on. Often we feel like we've got to cast a wider net to get more people into the business. But the problem is you haven't actually worked out what works on any of them yet. So your net that you've cast has got holes in it. And holes mean that fish slip through them. We end up posting content on one and it goes viral, but it's got nothing to do with your business. It went viral for all the wrong reasons. And you've just caught fish that you don't care about in your net. You've got followers coming in, but you can tell half of them are fake accounts. 2, you look at the accounts, you're like, is this person going to engage with my content? You want people that are ideal clients of yours, so you need to go where those people are and make that your place to learn your craft of content creation, to get to know your audience really effectively. By doing this, you reduce the amount of thinking you've got to do because you're only focused on one platform and the way that it works. LinkedIn needs something very different, and I haven't quite cracked all of it just yet, but it needs something very different to Instagram and TikTok. They're the most similar, but even they need different. Instagram's got stories in a very different way to the way that TikTok has stories. TikTok stories are naff as far as I'm concerned at this point in time. And they work slightly differently, but they're probably the closest. They're like sisters. Other than that, you've just got to get to know one. And you've got to just stick with it. And if you stick with it for 90 days, because 90 days is a reasonable amount of time to try and grow to see what's happening, and you find that you're not able to make it work despite you experimenting with your content and trying to get there, then by all means choose another platform to change over to. I started on Instagram with my life coaching business, and then I tried TikTok. I was getting a little bit frustrated at the lack of growth. TikTok kept coming up. It was popular at the time, and I thought, I don't want the kids at school to see me. But I had a very brief chat with a wonderful lady called Amy, and she was like, you kind of need to be on TikTok. And I was like, oh, I didn't want you to say that. Fine. So I experimented with it once I did my 1,000-mile solo road trip around the UK to Manchester, Dorset, back to Southend and to Norfolk. And actually, I was getting a little bit of traction. I thought, okay, I've got to stick with this. So Instagram became the backup. TikTok became the favourite. 5 posts a day, experimenting, etc. And Instagram took a backseat. I was still like vaguely on stories and sometimes cross-posted, repurposed. But again, that was it. That was all I was focused on, short form video content and anything just for convenience. There was no new content going out on Instagram that wasn't already on TikTok. So, waterfall method, one big piece of content moving down, prioritizing that and having a calendar overview and weekly and monthly schedules to determine exactly what you're doing, plus then making sure that you're only really focusing on one platform. The podcast is separate to that, or your blog post is separate to that. They are different things because they're the main brain of content. They're the top of the waterfall, they're the edge. And then down beneath that is just your one platform. Okay? The last thing I want to talk about in this episode, and I've briefly touched on one version of it, and that is AI. Artificial intelligence is taking over in many industries, and the podcasting, content creation industry is no exception to that. In fact, it's one of the biggest areas it comes in. Now, it comes with its dangers because we have this potential that people are just going to run everything through AI tools and are going to just churn out content for the sake of it. Now, if that's what people are going to do, go and do it. Because as far as I'm concerned, I've seen the content that those tools come up with and I'm not impressed. They're so generic, and even when I give it great prompts, and I can do some decent prompts with it, it doesn't sound like me. It's not right. And I know that my content is always going to stand out because it's my voice. And I'm going to tell you right now, this episode was planned with AI, but I'll show you what it looks like. This is my notebook for those that are watching the video. This is my notebook. It's got my initial plan before I asked AI. Here's what I wanted to talk about. One platform, post 1 to 3 times a week. Haven't mentioned that, interestingly. Then I asked it to give me an outline, and it gave me a few more ideas and a bit of a structure. So then I took my ideas, plugged it into that structure, and then I added my own little flares. All my stories are mine. My waterfall technique is mine. That didn't come from AI. I can use it as my assistant. It's my brainstormer. It's my apprentice who's coming up with a few little ideas that I hadn't thought of, but I still need to be able to talk about it in depth. And again, I can't just ask AI to come up with that because I'm the expert. I have the experience of using AI. I know what it's like to use AI. And I swear to God, all those emojis that AI bring up, give it away that you're using AI. So AI is a powerful tool to help you and assist you. It's not there to do the job for you, because the content I've seen so far just isn't good enough. And I tell you now, I promise you, look out at someone's caption this week. Look out for captions that have like an excessive amount, strangely excessive amount of emojis. Or you just read it and you're like, you didn't write that. That's got AI written all over it. Where's that really long word? Why did you use that word? That's not your language that you usually use. If you're going to use AI for captions, which I do, by the way, I ask it to help me with that, with titles, make sure it sounds like you. But AI is great. Descript, for example, uses artificial intelligence to find ums, ahs, and filler words in your podcasts and then takes them out for you. Who doesn't want that AI tool in their life? I already mentioned the co-host feature through Buzzsprout, which is when it creates a transcript for you, which one is great for SEO for your podcast anyway, but it also then comes up with 5 different names for your podcast that you can choose from, and you can just override it, but you could take bits that you like, put it together, and you're like, oh, what a great way of phrasing it. And it also then does show notes. I'm half and half with their show notes. I kind of like them as a starting point. And again, listen to me. I'm not sticking with anything it comes up with, bar the transcript. The transcript can stay, even with mistakes in it. It's better than not having a transcript. The rest I'm going to adapt. I'm going to change and make sound the way I need it to have the keywords in that I need it to, etc. It also does some little social media quotes. I'm not impressed by those. So, there's pros and cons to AI, but there are certain elements that you can use. You've also got other tools that aren't necessarily AI, but schedulers, of course. I use the Instagram scheduler all the time, or Meta Business Suite. LinkedIn, thankfully, has a scheduler. I don't think it's as advanced as I want it to be. It only has certain things like schedule, and then I'm pretty sure you can't edit the post if it's already scheduled. I haven't found a way yet anyway. So maybe I need to explore, or maybe that's just the way it is. There's pros and cons to doing certain things, but all of these things can help you to halve your content creation time so that you've got more time to actually work on your business. This is going to make you more strategic in the process because you have an actual structure and you are able to go away, get your content creation planned, done, and scheduled so it's out of the way for a week or a month. And I know that coming up with that time and actually committing to doing this can be a struggle, which is why I came up with Content Creation Club, which all the details are for in the show notes. If you want to find out about more about that or anything to do with podcast and online visibility, there's notes there. But I would love to hear from you if any of this has made the penny drop in your mind, or you go out there and try one of those strategies. It doesn't have to be all of them all tomorrow. I'm not expecting you to go out there and suddenly change absolutely everything you're doing. It's really difficult for us to do that. If you really want to succeed with this and start really reducing the time you spend on content creation, what I want you to do is choose one of the things that I've said today. Just one. And start it. Maybe it's the calendar view. Maybe it's starting to shift towards a podcast or blog. Maybe it's going to be giving up on one platform and just focusing in on one for the next week to 3 weeks. Once you've decided which one, drop me a DM and tell me that's what you're going to try. And then in 1, 2, 3 weeks' time, I'll check in with you and see what's happening with that process. See if you've got your time back. See how much time you've actually saved. Because if you could halve the amount of time that you spend on creating content and scheduling it, what could that time be used for to get the most impact out of your business, personal life, relationships, etc.? Let me know how you get on and find all of the information that you need in the podcast show notes. And let's keep changing the way the world thinks, one podcast at a time.